everyone. Nice to meet all of you. My name is Dedi Iskandar. I'm the Regional Director for Asia Pacifics of datacenterHawks. And nice to be in these new podcast seasons of what's happening in Asia Pacifics. Data center are fast moving, expensive, and a complex real estate asset class, right? At Data Center Hawks, we provide deal-based market intelligence via our platforms, which is compiled and fed by our data center experience team, so you can make a faster and a better decisions. Together with me, we have Donny Gunadi, the Senior Research Analyst for Australia's and New Zealand's regions with me. Donny, how are you today?
Very well, thank you, Dedi.
One thing that I could highlight about Asia Pacific data center market is that there are approximately 33 countries in Asia Pacific, whereby, like, for example, Northern America, I mean, the big one is just US and Canada, right? So there are many sub-markets in the US. Like we have Northern Virginia, Dallas, Phoenix, I would say San Francisco, and so on, right? But they are all within the same, what we call it, I would say, contractuals, I would say countries, right, within the countries itself. Whereby in Asia Pacific, you have different jurisdictions, different law, different, I would say, profile of the countries, some which is actually much more, I would say, well off, and some other countries are still picking up. The demographic of citizens are also different. Some which is very mature in terms of the demographics of age, whereby the penetrations of the internet are already quite in a very mature stage. But there are also countries where they're just starting up in terms of internet, right? So that's what makes these markets, I would say, its dynamics are very different between the north, the east, west, and the south, right? Do you think so? Or what can you actually highlight about? Maybe you would like to explain about some of the market which is the most unique, or one of the market that you think is quite unique in terms of how do they do things in data center.
Yeah, I think what I pay a very particular attention to is that when you look at the geographical layout of the country itself or the market itself, right? If you look at Singapore, it's a small piece of land, very dense, but it serves as a very strategic hub for all the submarine cables. So there's no brainer that continues to become the center of attention for the region, right? But then when you look at, when you cross the border to, let's say, Malaysia and then connect it to Thailand, that's like one piece of land, right? Oh, of course, yeah, Malaysia has like the west and the east part of Malaysia. So it is not as dispersed as if you compare it to Indonesia. Indonesia has like, how many islands? Like, 5, 6 different big islands, right? And that's where the infrastructure connecting each island, it determines how fast the market can grow, right? So for example, in Malaysia, you see the growth in Kuala Lumpur and then in JB, in Johor Bahru, right? Same thing in Indonesia, you see the growth in Jakarta, mainly. People have talked about Surabaya being the second biggest economy, but there are no significant investment, data center investment in Surabaya right now. So if you look at now to Australia, it's a one big piece of land. It's a country, it's a continent on its own. And the sophistication or the complexity, I should say, the complexity of connecting the different parts of the country, the different parts of the continent, is all terrestrial, right? So there are some initiatives to create terrestrial, and then on top of that, the submarine component to provide redundancy and things like that. But I think in terms of connectivity, I don't want to oversimplify it, but what I mean is that I think it is a lot doable to do inland kind of infrastructure, compared to if you're connecting an archipelago, right? Like Indonesia. Yeah. So yeah, I think it serves a certain challenge. It gives a certain challenge as well for the market to grow. So even though like a country that has so many millions of population, it may not be able to grow exponentially or linearly when we are trying to compare that against another country of similar population. We really need to look at the geography of the country itself. Yeah.
Great. Last question, Donny. We talk about I would say clouds, AI, and content. Right. I think these are the three major demand driver in Asia Pacific, where we use TikTok or we use Netflix or YouTube. Those are the content that need to be hosted in the data centers. On top of it, there's also the cloud, and recently, I think in the AI demand, right? So it's definitely booming in the other hemispheres, like in the North America, right? Everybody's all not talk about AI, and one way or another, they mentioned that AI might eventually outstrip the demand for cloud, right? And Asia Pacific, I've seen that it's starting, right? But what do you see in terms of this AI, or how significant this AI demand as compared to any other demand like a cloud or content, at least in your regions? What do you see?
Yeah, I see that this AI, I don't want to use the word hype, but this AI concept is the next trigger of the adoption of data center colocation service, right? If I remember in around 2015, 2016, that's when a lot of hyperscale cloud providers coming into the region. So they set up a region. Of course, Singapore is a lot more advanced than that. They've already set up availability zones in those areas. But in a more developed market like in Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, when they set up these regions, 2016, it was a wave, right? A huge wave of megawatts coming into the country, right? And
yes,
I think the adoption or the uptake of those capacities have sort of reached a certain point where the market already understands what sort of growth it will be. Will it be like a 5% a year or 10% a year? So there needs to be another wave to justify, to actually also drive the establishment of these data center providers.
Yeah. So we need more killer apps, right? In the way.
The killer apps, yeah. So all this AI stuff, I think you'll probably be living under a rock if you haven't used this AI stuff, right? Like all this from things that are on your laptop, things like the Google, the Google Gemini, the ChatGPT, Copilot, etc. And from what our children are using today, all this face modification, blah blah blah. I don't know. I've lost track on how. But all those things will need some sort of a processing end at a data center. And with all this GPU, with a much faster processing power, it is a lot more power hungry. So now the battle, if I see, is that we all have heard about this DeepSeek versus the OpenAI stuff was talked about the past few days, few weeks, right? I think that battle will still continue, and there will probably be no single winner as such. I mean, I think they will all have its own market, coexist in the market. But nevertheless, whoever wins the battle, whether it's DeepSeek, whether it's OpenAI, for us who operate in the infrastructure space, in the real estate space, all these applications will need to be hosted in the data center somewhere.
So no matter what, they still need data centers.
No matter, yeah. I guess the difference would be then the power needed probably not as much, but then it's better also if it's not so much power requirement, because then the cooling requirement will be lower. It's cheaper also to implement, and it actually helps boost the industry in a much more organic way. Yeah? I remember when I was working in a data center provider, we were talking about 8 kilowatts per rack, 10 kilowatts per rack maximum, and that's already pushing it because, you create hotspots in the data center, right? But then the moment we start talking about all this GPU stuff, and I think we're talking about 100 something kilowatt per rack.
Yes.
I thought whoever designed the data center in the first place with the conventional method, they must be like scratching their head now. Said, how am I going to solve this problem, right? So then we start talking about direct-to-chip cooling, liquid cooling, and immersion cooling. It's easy to study and to talk about all these new technologies, but I can imagine how much challenging it is from a commercial perspective to implement this in an existing data center. So it is not like flipping your hands. It's going to have its challenges, and at the end of the day, no AI initiatives will be willingly paying for. Oh, okay, it requires immersion cooling. I'll pay the price. It's not going to be like that. It will come back to what is reasonable on a per kilowatt basis. And it probably will still, I don't know, but it probably will still look at the current market price as a reference, right?
Yes.
On a per kilowatt basis. So time will tell, I guess. And for specifically for my market, there are a lot of AI talks happening. Mm-hmm. There is like, a cluster of AI deployment, a few hundred kilowatts in several data centers. But I'm looking forward to how all the hyperscalers, the cloud providers, adopt AI onto their environment, because I think that will be a game changer as well when all these big cloud providers start implementing the AI, the GPU stuff onto their ecosystem, onto their environment.
Fantastic, Donny. That's a very great insight.
Thank you. I'm glad that I'm able to share this, and time will tell again whether my analysis is correct or not. At this point in time, it's an exciting time to be in data center space.
It is.
And as people say, if you blink too long, you probably missed out a lot of things. So have to keep watching the space.
So for our general audience, I would say that to close on this, I would say podcast, data center are fast moving, and a complex real estate asset class, right? At datacenterHawk, we provide deal-based market intelligence via our platforms, which is compiled and fed by our data center experience team, so you can make a faster and a better decisions. Thank you so much for joining our podcast, and we'll see you again. Yes. Bye-bye.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.